Happy Friday, everybody. I'm Scott L. Miller. This is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. Today on the WhatsApp group, we were talking a little bit about safety and danger and different things that you can do to protect yourself when living abroad. And here in Nicaragua, like anywhere, even though it's a super safe country, there's still, you don't want to be silly and you don't want to do things that put yourself in any unnecessary danger. And one of the things came up that there were some people who experience what they feel like is a relatively common amount of danger here in Nicaragua, and most of us experience far less. And obviously some people just get unlucky. Obviously some people put themselves in different situations. We live in different areas of the country. There's a lot of factors that make things very different, but there's one that came up in the discussion that I think is well worth digging into, because for a lot of you who may be considering moving to Nicaragua, you may accidentally create a situation where you're in far more risk of, I don't want to make it sound like violent crime, but more of a worry that your stuff will be stolen or whatever than most of us experience. And it may not be what you would expect, because I think it's very different than what you would experience in many of the countries that you would be moving from. So what is it? How can you protect yourself, or at least lower this risk, not make yourself such a target? We're going to talk about that right after the bump. I've got the raspberry mate hat on today from Argentina. So what is this factor that makes people so much more in danger, I feel, than many others here in Nicaragua? Well, that is buying what is known as a quinta. So what is a quinta? This is something that if you're moving to Nicaragua or moving to this part of the world, it's very possible you've never heard the term, or you've heard it only in conjunction with the hotel chain in the United States that's invoking the concept of a quinta to give what would feel to those who speak the language a sense of a very luxurious kind of country setting experience for a hotel. To the majority of Americans, it means absolutely nothing and is a little bit confusing. So it's a weird name to have picked for a hotel chain, but seems to have worked for them. But what it means here is we have two types of words like this, and people often get them confused. So I'm going to do my best to give you an idea of what they mean. So one is a finca. This is F-I-N-C-A. A finca is a working farm. Now someone's going to jump in with closer definitions of, well, it's got to be this kind of farm, it's got to be this kind of size, it's got to be this kind of location. But a finca is a working farm. It is a place where you would go and expect agricultural activities to be taking place. So that is not a place that someone uses part-time. It is not something that is luxurious. It is not what you would often consider an estate, nothing like that. It's much closer to a farm than to other words. We don't have an exact word for it in English. Now, when you're dealing with a quinta, what you're dealing with is a non-working country estate that would resemble a finca in many ways. There's probably better definitions of that as well, but this is Q-U-I-N-T-A, again, like the hotel chain. The reason that quintas are popular is that if you live in the city, this presumes you are working or have lots of activities you need to do in one of the cities. Well, the cities tend to be pretty hot. This is Nicaragua, after all. We're in the tropics. The cities hold on to a lot of heat, and people, while they may go out and go to the bar, go see music, do lots of things during the week, often on the weekends, when they have a chance to get away from work and you are excessively wealthy, normally as a family, you may have a country estate where you go on the weekends to relax, to cool down, where there's more breezes and more shade. Maybe you have a lot of animals around. You may have animals even though it's not a working farm. And of course, some people find agricultural activities to be interesting. So you may have horses or whatever on it, but it's not there to generate money. It's there to be a relaxing country estate. Think of England in the 19-teens or so. Right? There's people who had to, lawyers and doctors and businessmen would have their place in London, their place in Manchester during the week. And then on the weekends, they would go out to big country houses with lots of space to relax on the weekends. Americans don't tend to do this very often. Certainly, these types of properties do exist in America, but they are rare. What we did have, however, instead, is a culture of having waterfront houses. Often, where I grew up in New York, a lake house was a common thing. Now, partially in the United States, the weather means that these things just aren't as practical. Having a country house just doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. The United States was mostly country until recently. So it was the city house that was actually the less common one. And because the massive changes in weather for the majority of American population, it just doesn't make sense to have a secondary house in the same way. But something like a lake house that is only desirable during the summer and highly desirable during the summer would actually make a lot of sense. In the winter, no one wants to live out by the lake. It's difficult to deal with driving, and it's potentially dangerous and far from where you need to work. And during the summer, it's a great place to go cool off. So it kind of makes sense. You can see that similar underlying needs create two very different cultures. But here in Nicaragua, it very much mimics England back when people had country houses on a regular basis. And just like in England, country houses were normally owned by the rich. Having one house of your own was already quite something. Having two or more definitely moved you into the upper echelons of the economic sector. And as we know, in England, it was normal and remains normal today that if you do have a big secondary country estate, that you're going to have staff that are based there. This doesn't mean you have hundreds of people, but you may have one or two or three people who are out there maybe taking care of the gardens, maybe they do some cooking, a maid who cleans, and so forth, because you want that house to be ready and you don't want to leave a country estate unattended for any real period of time, because it's just way too tempting for someone to come up, take a fire extinguisher, bash in a door, and run through the building grabbing all of your cool whatever things you have in your house, your knickknacks and whatever, grab them, throw them in a bag, and run off, right? You're not looking at armed robbery in England any more than you are here in Nicaragua, but that you could grab cool things from around the house and even take off with a TV or whatever, not very hard. When you're dealing with a place in the country, it's generally pretty easy to actually back a truck right up and be nearby, maybe outside the gate. Maybe they are able to get inside the gate and grab a bunch of stuff, throw it in the truck, and take off. So you have quite a bit of risk because you have this country house, and it should be pretty obvious. Country houses do not have direct neighbors under normal circumstances. If someone's breaking into your house, if you don't have someone there watching it, it's going to be basically unattended. It's not like your neighbors are looking out going, I don't think someone's supposed to be working on the house today. It's not like that. And country houses, quintas, often have a lot of staff on the outside and a lot of guests that they may not know about. It's not uncommon to send people to your house when you're not there. That's a fantastic use of that property. It's kind of like having your own private bed and breakfast. What a fun thing to do, but you need to be aware that when doing so, leaving one unattended would leave it truly unattended. Who is going to know how it is being used or how it's supposed to be used? Most of us here in Nicaragua, whether you're living in a small community like out on the beach or a village or right in the city or here on the edge of the city like we are, I'm in a gated community. I am not in a quinta. I am close to the quinta zone, so we do have a lot more fresh air. We do have a lot more trees. You can probably hear some of the insects going on in the distance. We have a gorgeous sky today. It's so beautiful. And in a situation like this, I have close neighbors. So if someone was to be breaking into my house, one, my neighbors are generally very aware of when I am and am not here. We can see each other's cars and driveways and parking spots. We know each other's patterns. We share a gate. We have shared security. We can go talk to them, and security can be like, no, they're not here right now. Now, ignoring that we have security, just having neighbors who are very aware of us over time, they know exactly who should be here, who shouldn't be here, what a break-in would look like, when we're gone for any real amount of time. They also know that we're never gone. Like, because of our dogs and our kids, we never leave the place empty, but we certainly could. We could easily leave the house empty for weeks at a time and not worry at all, because we're in a gated community and we're able to actually lock up the house. Unlike many Nicaraguan homes, especially here in Leon or in Granada, we don't have that colonial open middle of the house. That is very difficult to lock down. Many of them literally have no closure, and so that's one of the reasons why you sometimes see barbed wire or Constantine around the middle of some of these old colonial houses. It's because that is the sole deterrent to someone getting in the house. There is no locked door or similar to keep people out. So because we have a fully lockable house, we have solid concrete walls, we have a fence around the house, it's pretty difficult to get into the house. We could leave it unattended if we needed to, but we never really do because of the dogs and such. There's just always somebody here taking care of the animals. But even if there wasn't, our neighbors would have a really good eye on the house. We wouldn't be worried about things. Now, in our case, we don't even need the neighbors to be here because we have full-time security. It's a gated private community with our own security guards that are here 24/7. So they keep a very close eye on all the houses. They know absolutely every person who's authorized to come and go because no one's allowed in or out without them opening the gate for them and checking who they are. In most cases, it's just us, so they just let us in. But if we have guests, we just have them announced and they let them in. So they know who's supposed to be here. They know what vehicles are supposed to be here. Makes it very, very safe. So if you're in a gated community like this, those kinds of fears are mostly gone. Now, as many of you know, we were burgled, but only on the outside, only in areas that are not heavily monitorable from the neighbors and such. It was someone who was very carefully hiding in a spot out of sight and never attempted to enter the house in any way whatsoever. They were simply going for things that were outside of the house. Now, we do have a lot of things that are outside. I'm just going to turn around real quickly. I don't know if you can see. We have an outdoor kitchen out here, right? So this would be a perfect example of where this is a prime target. We have a grill, a smoker, and so forth. We also have fans over here. We have dining room table table, and quite often we may leave things out here because it's so safe. We don't really have to worry about it. We do have these small extra security items that people sometimes mention, and we use them to make our outside space so secure and something we don't have to worry about, that leaving just any random thing outside is not something we actually worry about. That's a really nice feature. Now, most people are not going to be able to have that. That's an extreme step to be able to do that. Normally, you need to treat your outside like the outside and take your valuables inside and, you know, lock your doors, at least if you're not going to be there. We could safely leave all the doors open, all of our stuff sitting outside in the open, and come back with great confidence that everything would still be there. So we do like having that extra step, but we're very fortunate to be there. We do know that when we lived in La Barrio, we know when we lived in Las Pinitas, we couldn't have that kind of behavior. That was super silly. But here, we're actually able to have that. If you live in the city, for example, you may not have these extra layers of protection, the extra fence outside. You may be right on the sidewalk, right off a city street, but then you're going to have shared walls with neighbors, a shared back with neighbors. You're going to have neighbors who can hear what's going on in your house. Should there be a scuffle or something, if they're screaming, they can see if someone is trying to get in through your roof, because it'll be visible from their house. They can see if someone's trying to go in your front door. They know everything about you. They're looking at the people across the street. The people across the street are looking at them. You get a similar behavior to what we have here very easily. Plus, you almost always have neighbors sitting out on the street. It's part of the culture here in Nicaragua. Now, middle of the day, there's lots of people on the street, but in the evenings, you'll often have neighbors just sitting out on the street. And so the whole street is getting watched. It's not meant to be a security mechanism, but it's basically like having a neighborhood watch that's out there greeting everyone that comes in up and down the street. So there's a lot of security that happens simply through Nicaraguan culture as well. But all this brings us to normal Nicaraguan life is quite secure by nature. But if you have a quinta, which is a popular thing for expats to come look for, because many expats are able to afford quintas, and they're going to do a little bit different behavior. For a Nicaraguan, it is rare to live in a quinta. It is something you visit from time to time, and they generally don't put too many valuable things in them. But they might. But as an expat, it is normal to get one and use it as your full-time house, at least while you're here. That means that all of your valuables are going to be there. And if someone is going to try to do anything there, they're going to be hoping you're not there at the time. So how do you handle that? Because quintas are estates, they have lots of space around them and a lot of things to take care of. So it is normal, if you have an estate like that, that you'll have staff that take care of the estate. Even here in this is an estate, but not a quinta. We have space for multiple staff to live here, as well as more to be able to work here. It is designed for there to be a crew taking care of the house. The house is very large. It would be very difficult for a family to maintain it on its own. A quinta would be much more extreme than this. So the expectation is that you're going to have staff, and the general thought is that you will have those people, cuidadores, who stay there year round. So you can come and go, and there's always someone watching the house. If they need to not be there, they would let you know, and you'd stay there while they're out doing whatever they need to do, which is generally very easy. Many expats will get quintas and use them when they like the weather and go back to their home country or travel quite a bit of the time. Very normal behavior for a great number of expats. Totally a usual thing. However, this makes something like a quinta even a higher profile, because many people will figure out that you are gone for large periods of time, and that makes your quinta a prime target, because there's plenty of time and effort to break in quite seriously using battering rams or picking locks or whatever, things that take time. They have time to do it because they know you're not going to be there. Now, if you have a cuidador, that would be very hard to do. People who have cuidadors generally leave their houses open or nearly open much of the time, because no one's going to break in, no one's going to bother walking into your house. Way too dangerous. Go sneak into someone's house at night, look around the house with a flashlight. You might find yourself facing a cuidador with a machete in the darkness outside as you exit the house, and that will be the end of you robbing their house very quickly. So that's not something that people really want to encounter. So they're going to mostly avoid that. People are going to look for houses that are simply not being watched over, and quintas are this perfect one. If you don't have those people around all the time, they can sneak in with no one can hear because of the space around, no one can see because of the distance, and they are pretty much in a great position to just take their time breaking into your house. Now, they're not going to be breaking in with weapons or anything like that. They're just breaking in with crowbars or whatever's handy. They don't want to carry things that will show off that they were planning to rob a house should they be stopped on the way to or from. They want to have normal instruments, maybe a machete or which is used absolutely everywhere. So that is one negative, that there are people carrying machetes just about anywhere, or screwdrivers or something like that. Things that is like, okay, there's a reason you might be carrying that. We can't tell you were going to rob a house based on that alone. but those kinds of things, right? But they have time to use those implements to get in because no one's around. So that is why quintas have a tendency to be a much more high profile target, and why expats who are living in them, especially if they're part-time, are likely to experience a lot of problems that people living in places like gated communities or in the middle of cities are far less likely to experience. Now, can you have a break-in anywhere? Absolutely, of course you can. Is it likely? No, but break-ins here in Nicaragua are more common than in the U.S., but armed break-ins are far less likely in Nicaragua than in the U.S. So it's all about a balance and understanding what things you are worried about and how to approach them. And with a little bit of common sense and effort, it is very humid today. It's a beautiful day, but very humid. You can do an awful lot to protect yourself, both in how you choose or what you choose as a place to live, how you approach that place to live, and then what you do is day-to-day security. So for quintas, I think you're almost always going to be in a position where you need to take extreme security precautions simply because it is such an easy target. You are the low-hanging fruit. It is the expectation that you are both wealthy and at risk. That's not a great place to be. You're easy pickings with more to pick. But if you're in the city, you have a normal house, you're not doing anything that flags you as being particularly wealthy, it's easy to disappear into the background. Simply keep your house well secured, and you're not going to be that low-hanging fruit. It's too much effort to get into your house. They'll go on to your neighbor, and they're just going to break in wherever it's easy. Whoever's not home, whoever doesn't have a good lock, whoever forgot to lock their door, whoever has an open in the top that they can easily squeeze through and no one knows, and that's when they'll try to sneak in when people are sleeping, right? If they don't have to break in through a door, they can just drop into the shadows, grab whatever you left laying around, hop back on the roof and go, right? It's not a big scary thing. You'll probably not know that they were ever there, and that's their goal, right? They want to sneak in, sneak out with as minimal noise and interruption as possible. So thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAllenMiller. And as always, get in the comments, ask your questions, leave your comments, say hello, engage with other people in the community. Check in the show notes for anything you need, how to contact me, how to send in a video question, how to support the show, how to support my producer in her fight against Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I will see all of you tomorrow.